My family denied me help for my cousin. He failed. I made millions. Now they want IN. My family refused to help me with my business venture because they chose to invest in my cousin instead. But now that he failed and my company is successful, they call my company the family business. I'm Zachary. I'm 34 years old, and I grew up in a family that, well, lived comfortably. My dad had several businesses spread throughout the city, real estate, retail trade, and a few others. My mom owns several buildings. Yes, plural. My grandparents, although not as wealthy, were the first entrepreneurs who managed to gather enough success to give my parents their initial push. There's an expectation that if you're born into this family, you either inherit something and don't ruin it, or you start your own empire. Naturally, I wanted to go with the latter option. I wasn't a naive kid dreaming about opening a beach shack in the Bahamas. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I had a plan. A solid one, in my opinion: cybersecurity. Since I was 14 years old and accidentally hacked into my school server to change my detention record, I discovered I have a talent for computers. I went to college, graduated in computer science, and spent hours obsessed with encryption, data breaches, and programming. After graduating, I realized that cybersecurity isn't just an interesting career, it's also lucrative. Every company needs it. Every bank, every hospital. It's like selling umbrellas in a world where it always rains from data breaches. I had a vision, a potential client base, and a detailed business plan that, in my opinion, would impress anyone. But here was the problem. I needed money to start. A lot of money. I wasn't asking for millions, okay, just enough to rent office space, hire a small team, and invest in initial software and hardware. I could have started with less, sure, but I had this very clear picture in my head of what the company would be like. One morning, I approached my parents. We were sitting in the living room, and I presented my idea to them. I had charts, market research, and passion. I asked them for a loan, not a gift, not free money. It was about a loan I would repay with interest once the business took off. They said, "Zach, we love you, but we don't think you have what it takes to run a business." They didn't say it cruelly. My dad sighed as he said it, as if it physically hurt him to reject me. My mom gave me one of those pitying looks that moms give when they think you're being adorably naive. My dad explained that being a good programmer doesn't automatically make you a good businessman. Running a company involves, well, running it, managing accounts, employees, investors, losses, all those boring and not fun parts. And according to them, I simply didn't have that spark. For them, investing in me wasn't investing, it was throwing money away. I'm not gonna lie, that hurt. First, I was angry, very angry. But still, I didn't want to give up on my dream. A month after my parents rejected my funding request, my cousin Bernard was getting married. A big, lavish wedding. 3 days of events, champagne fountains, the whole show. At one point, I was standing with my parents near the buffet table when Bernard approached us. He greeted my parents, shook my dad's hand, and then said, "Uncle, Aunt, thank you again for believing in me and helping me with the funds for my hotel business. I couldn't have done it without you." I stood there staring at Bernard as if he had just confessed he was a time traveler. My parents laughed nervously, said something polite, and quickly changed the subject. I had asked for funding. They said no. But Bernard got funding for a hotel. A freaking hotel. I left there with some lame excuse because I felt betrayed. Not because they funded Bernard, I mean good for him, I guess, but because they wouldn't do the same for me. They trusted Bernard, but me, their own son? Apparently not worth the risk. At some point, my grandmother found me sitting there. "Zachary, what are you doing here? Why aren't you inside enjoying the wedding?" And there's something about grandmothers, you can't lie to them. You just can't. So I told her everything. She simply let me vent. Then she said something I'll never forget. "Zachary, sometimes people see potential in others because they see a version of themselves in them. Your father may see a younger version of himself in Bernard, but that doesn't mean you're not capable. You're different, and being different isn't bad. It's just different." She squeezed my hand and added, "You're smart. You work hard. Someday you're going to build something incredible. It'll just be on your own terms." I know it sounds like a lot of cliche phrases, but that was exactly what I needed at that moment. The day after the wedding, I was still in this weird emotional fog, half motivated by what my grandmother said, but also half devastated. I was sitting on my couch when my phone rang. It was my grandfather. Now, my grandfather isn't the type of person who calls just to chat, so naturally I panicked. I asked if everything was okay, and he told me everything was fine and that he just wanted me to come see him. I just said, "Okay, Grandpa, I'll be there in 2 hours." When I arrived at his house, my grandmother opened the door and gave me a warm smile. "Come in, Zachary. Your grandfather is in his study." He was sitting in his chair there when I entered, but he immediately got up and hugged me. And at that moment, I started to relax a bit. My grandfather didn't waste time on small talk. He said, "Your grandmother told me what happened at the wedding and how you feel about your business plans. Oh, so that's what this was about." I nodded, trying to maintain a neutral expression. He continued, "I want you to know something. I started my first business with nothing more than an old van and a loan from my uncle. It wasn't easy, and everyone thought I was going to fail. But I didn't. And you know why?" I shook my head. "Because someone believed in me. Sometimes just one person can make all the difference." Then he reached into his desk drawer, pulled out a checkbook, wrote something, and handed it to me. Now, I'm not going to tell you the exact amount, but let's say it wasn't pocket money. It wasn't everything I needed to launch my cybersecurity company, but it was enough to start, enough to make a real difference. I stood staring at the check for what seemed like a full 5 minutes. Finally, I managed to say, "Grandpa, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he said. "This isn't just money, it's trust. I'm investing in you." I was trying with all my might not to lose my composure, but my grandfather simply stood up, came over, hugged me, and said, "Make us proud." On the drive home, I kept looking at the check. It wasn't just money, it was proof that someone believed in me. This is already an incredible story of perseverance, but it gets even better. If you're feeling inspired by Zachary's determination, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. And drop a comment. Have you ever been rejected by family for something you believed in? Let's hear your story. After getting the initial funding from my grandfather, I knew I had to be smart with every penny. I didn't splurge on fancy desks or trendy office chairs. We started small. I contacted my two best friends, Adam and Luis. We pooled what little we had saved and rented a tiny, cramped office in the most dangerous area of the city. But hey, it was ours. Those first 2 years were brutal. We worked 14 to 16 hours a day. We barely rested on weekends, and I survived on instant noodles and vending machine snacks. Luis went from one call to another. Adam was buried in code. And me? Well, I did everything at once. Our first big client was a medium-sized financial company that had just been hacked. We managed to repair their systems, recover their data, and prevent future breaches. That project gave us enough money to move to a slightly better office. Little by little, we started gaining traction. Word of mouth began to spread, and we started getting bigger clients. About 4 years later, we hit our first major milestone. We had enough revenue to consider expanding. We opened our second office in a nearby city, and a year later, we opened a third in another major city. By then, we were no longer just an improvised startup. We were a real company. Around that time, we also started a cybersecurity consulting firm. It seemed like the natural next step. Companies weren't just asking us to fix breaches. They also wanted to prevent them proactively. And let me tell you, consulting money feels different. About 5 years after starting the business, I was finally in a position to pay back my grandparents. I drove to their house, check in hand, and told them, "This is yours with interest." But I didn't stop there. These two people had given me everything when no one else would. So I bought them a new house. Nothing ridiculously extravagant, but cozy, comfortable, and in a neighborhood they'd always loved. Seeing them walk through their new home, pointing out little details they liked, was one of the most rewarding moments of my life. While our cybersecurity business thrived, Bernard's hotel did not. The situation hit the hospitality industry hard, and Bernard's hotel never fully recovered. Apparently, my parents gave him even more money to help, but despite his efforts, and honestly, I feel bad for him, the hotel eventually closed. So last weekend, we were celebrating my grandparents' 50th wedding anniversary. Because they are literally the reason I have everything I have today, I wanted to make sure I continued to thank them for what they did. I didn't spare any expense. I rented a beautiful hotel ballroom, hired catering, organized a live band, and invited basically everyone, friends, family, and even some old neighbors they hadn't seen in years. Honestly, planning this event felt more emotional than some of the biggest business deals I've closed. The party was spectacular. Everyone was dressed up, the food was incredible, and my grandparents were so happy, which is what mattered. But then my parents came into the picture. At some point in the night, I heard my dad talking to one of his old friends. When his friend said he must be proud of me, he responded by talking about family values and how his support and guidance had put me on the right path. He also mentioned, "It's practically a family business now." Excuse me, what? I hadn't heard wrong. As the night went on, I kept hearing fragments of conversations where my parents painted themselves as the backbone of my success. "We always knew he'd do something great. We supported him every step of the way. It's what we do as a family. We lift each other up." And the kicker, my dad said, "It's all thanks to the family's initial support." Look, I'm not saying I needed my parents to kneel before me or apologize with tears in their eyes or anything like that, but for them to take credit for something they actively refused to support, that really didn't sit well with me. I tried to enjoy the rest of the night, but I was really angry, so I changed my speech. Originally, I had planned something simple, a sincere tribute to Grandma and Grandpa, but after everything I heard heard that night, I knew I couldn't let it pass. I started with a light tone. I made a couple of jokes, mentioned how their marriage was older than the internet, and talked about the love and respect they always showed each other. But then I got serious. And here's the part of my speech. You see, Grandma and Grandpa didn't just build a life together. They built a legacy. A legacy of love, trust, and most importantly, faith in people. When I had a dream and everyone else shut the door in my face, they opened it. They didn't just believe in my idea, they believed in me. And everything I have today, I owe to their faith in me when no one else had it. I paused. My parents were staring at me with frozen smiles on their faces. So tonight, I want to propose a toast to Grandma and Grandpa, the only two people who believed in me when no one else did. This success is theirs and no one else's. Grandma was crying. Grandpa nodded with that proud, quiet smile he has. And my parents were smiling forcefully with clenched teeth. About 15 minutes after the speech, my dad found me near the dessert table. He was basically yelling at me. What the heck was that speech? Were you trying to humiliate us in front of everyone? Humiliate you? I just told the truth. You didn't believe in me, but Grandma and Grandpa did. My mom joined in. You didn't have to air family problems in front of everyone. You made us look really bad. At that point, I was biting my tongue, trying not to explode. But then my dad said, you act like we did nothing for you. We gave you a good life, a good education. How dare you make us look like the villains in your little success story? First, I didn't yell, but my voice definitely went up in pitch. You know what? You didn't believe in me. You had the money, but you gave it to Bernard for his hotel without thinking twice. And when he failed, you gave him even more. But when I came to you with my idea, you told me I wasn't the business type. At that moment, I realized the room had gone completely silent. Guests were staring. My cousin Bernard, the one with the failed hotel, was uncomfortably sipping his drink in a corner, as if he wanted to disappear. My dad pointed his finger at me. You're being ungrateful. And I responded, completely losing control. Ungrateful? Why? I'm not ungrateful. I'm just saying out loud what everyone already knows. My chest felt tight. My face was hot. And I realized I had just caused a scene at what was supposed to be a celebration for my grandparents. I looked around and saw my grandmother looking at me with a soft, sad expression. Not disappointed, just sad. My grandfather had his arm around her, as if trying to keep her calm. That's when the guilt hit me. I didn't say another word. I just turned around, walked out of the ballroom, and didn't even grab my coat. I got in my car, slammed the door, and sat there for a few minutes, staring at the steering wheel, trying to calm down. That night, I didn't sleep. I replayed the argument over and over in my head. The next morning, I received a text from my grandmother. Zachary, we love you very much. Please don't feel bad about last night. We understand. But that really didn't make me feel better. I've been thinking a lot about it. Did I go too far? Did I ruin a night that was supposed to be for my grandparents? Update 1. I think it's fair to give you an update because you've all been very good at commenting on my post. I thought things would calm down after that night. I thought maybe everyone would reflect a bit and then we'd have an adult, appropriate conversation. But no, my parents decided to go nuclear. Started small. A cousin texted me something like, hey Zach, is it true you manipulated Grandma and Grandpa into giving you money? That's what Uncle said. First, I laughed because, come on, it sounded ridiculous. But then the calls kept coming. An aunt messaged me on social media saying she was disappointed in how I used my grandparents' emotions to get money from them. So I called my grandmother immediately because I needed to know if she was okay. She said, don't worry about what others say. We know the truth, and that's all that matters. Honestly, she's the sweetest woman in the world, and hearing her voice calmed me down a bit, but I couldn't ignore the fact that my parents were out there spinning a twisted narrative. I'm not someone who likes confrontation, despite what my meltdown at the anniversary might suggest. But this time, I couldn't let it go. I called my parents and asked, what the heck are you telling everyone? Why are people calling me saying I manipulated Grandma and Grandpa? To this, my mom responded, well, didn't you cry to them? Didn't you make them feel bad for you? That's manipulation. I said, I wasn't crying to them. I was telling them my situation because that's called having emotions. I heard my dad speak in the background. You can interpret it however you want, Zachary, but everyone sees you for what you really are now. I told them, okay, perfect. Say whatever you want to everyone. I'm tired of trying to explain to you. And I hung up. I thought hanging up would give me some peace, but it didn't. Over the next week, the rumors only got worse. One relative said they heard I threatened to cut off Grandma and Grandpa if they didn't give me money. Another said I bragged about how I manipulated them and laughed about it afterward. It felt like I was losing my mind. I mean, how do you fight something like that? It's so absurd it almost seems comical, except it's not funny when people you care about start believing it. One day, my cousin Bernard, yes, that cousin, even called me. He said, hey man, I know things are complicated right now, but do you think you could talk to Uncle and Aunt and fix this? I said, there's nothing to fix, Bernard. They know the truth. They're just choosing to ignore it. I texted my parents, I can't keep doing this. You've made the decision to spread these these lies, and I can't keep trying to convince you otherwise. I'm going to distance myself from this relationship for now. I love you both, but I can't keep letting this hurt me. And that was it. I blocked them on social media because they were posting passive-aggressive things about me. I stopped responding to relatives who were clearly just looking for gossip. I'm in a strange place right now. If something happens, I'll keep you posted. Update 2. It's been a while. Man, has it been. I wish I was coming back with better news, but life doesn't always want to give you good news. My grandfather passed away last month. The only good thing I can say about it is that he went in his sleep. In a way, it was peaceful. But man, it still hit me like a truck. I don't need to say in this update how important he's been to me, and I'm not talking about the money, but about the support and as an example of a person. As soon as I got the news, I packed a bag and drove straight to my grandmother's house. She looked so small and fragile when I walked in, but she still managed to give me a weak smile and a hug. I don't think I've ever hugged anyone so tightly in my life. Organizing the funeral was difficult, but I needed to do it for my grandmother. My parents were there too, and although we were civil, there was this strange tension in the air. Like we all knew there were unresolved issues, but no one had the energy to address them in the midst of grief. The funeral itself was beautiful. Honestly, hundreds of people attended. My grandfather was one of those genuinely good souls, and seeing how many lives he touched was overwhelming. Old business partners, childhood friends, neighbors, people came from all over to pay tribute. I tried to stay strong during the eulogy, but man, I lost my composure halfway through. My grandmother squeezed my hand the whole time, and I'm so grateful she was there because I don't think I could have done it otherwise. Now, here's where things got a bit complicated. My grandfather wasn't incredibly wealthy or anything, but he did own some properties, including a beautiful lakeside house. It's the kind of place you'd see on postcards. A wooden dock, large windows overlooking the water, surrounded by trees. My dad spent a lot of time there as a kid, and even I have memories of running along the dock, fishing with Grandpa, and roasting marshmallows by the campfire. So during the reading of the will, the lawyers started listing the assets, and then we got to the lake house. My grandfather left it to me and my cousin Laura. To give context, Laura is the daughter of my dad's sister. She's honestly great, someone I get along with well. At the moment my dad heard the words, Zachary and Laura will share ownership of the lake house, I swear I saw him clench his jaw. He didn't say anything at that moment, but his face said it all. He was furious, like really furious. After the reading, he walked out without saying a word to me. My mom followed him, and I just sat there, awkward, with Laura and my grandmother. Over the following days, while I stayed with my grandmother, my dad avoided me completely. If we were in the same room, he acted like I was invisible. My mom gave me those weird half-smiles, but didn't say much either. It's unbelievable to me because it's not like I asked for the lake house. I didn't even know Grandpa was going to leave it to me, but somehow I felt like my dad saw it as another personal attack, like Grandpa was taking my side in an imaginary war. Laura and I talked about it one night over tea. She admitted she felt uncomfortable too, because her mom, my dad's sister, also wasn't exactly happy with the will. But at least Laura's mom didn't act cold. One afternoon, while helping my grandmother organize some of Grandpa's old things, she sat down with me. She said, "Your grandfather loved your father very much, Zachary, but he also saw how hard you worked, how much you struggled to prove yourself. He wanted you to have something that meant a lot to him." I think she knew I felt guilty about the whole situation, like I had unintentionally caused an even bigger rift between my dad and me. But my grandmother said something that stuck with me. "Your grandfather wasn't taking sides. He was choosing love. He loved you and he loved Laura. That's why he wanted you both to have a place where you could always feel close to him." The night before I went back home, I ran into my dad in the kitchen. He was making tea and I was filling a glass with water. For a moment, everything was silent. Neither of us said anything. But then he spoke. "You know, that lake house was supposed to stay in the family. It was supposed to be ours." I responded, "It still is, Dad. I'm not going to sell it. I'm not going to turn it into a rental property. It's still ours." He didn't respond. He just stirred his tea, put down the spoon, and walked out. Update 3. There are some things I need to address now, since my father has decided to file a legal complaint against me. He believes the lake house belongs to him, even though my grandfather left it to me and my cousin Laura. I can't talk much about the details because everything is very complicated and legal, but I'll try to give you an idea of what's happening. It all started when my dad began showing up at my house unannounced, demanding that I hand over the lake house. At first, I thought maybe he was just upset and wanted to talk, but when I refused to give in, he started making threats. He told me my grandfather's will was wrong and that I was wrong for not sharing the house with him. It was like a switch had been flipped in him. Then came the legal documents. I won't go into details, but basically, my dad's team of lawyers sent me official documents accusing me of obtaining the lake house improperly and demanding I hand it over. He alleges it's his inheritance, not mine, and that I manipulated my grandfather into leaving it to me. I mean, it's ridiculous. My grandfather clearly left the house to Laura and me. My mom keeps trying to be a mediator, trying to convince me to give in and just hand the house over to my dad so we can move past this. I'm at a point where I don't think there's any turning back. I don't think we can ever repair whatever's been broken. I don't think you'll have a post for me during this time, at least until everything settles and I can give you more details about all this. Update 4. This update comes a long time after the last one, and believe me, I would have liked it to be earlier, precisely because that would have meant the whole trial with my father had ended sooner. But it didn't. Not until now, when I can speak freely about everything that's happened. Well, no, my father couldn't invalidate my grandfather's will and get the house, which would have been perfect for him, as I'll explain later. The lawsuit should have lasted quite a short time, really, but my father had good lawyers, at least in the art of delaying things, and it dragged on longer than usual. I think he was hoping I'd finally throw in the towel and tell him the house would be his. Something I couldn't have done anyway, because it also belongs to my cousin. But not even my aunt joined this crusade of my father's. And when my grandmother told me my grandfather really wanted me to have it, I couldn't back down. Fortunately, my grandmother's testimony was helpful for the trial, since my father had nothing, absolutely nothing. The only thing he managed to do was spend an impressive amount of money they don't have on lawyers. But he also managed to make me spend money. But if there's anything good he did for me, it's that in addition to carrying his rhetoric that I had manipulated my grandfather to the family, he also expanded it to more people, to the point where it was affecting my business. So we played a game of chess, and we filed a legal complaint against him for defamation and for compensation for damages. I don't know the value of the house Grandpa left us because we haven't appraised it since we don't want to sell it. But I'm sure what he lost on lawyers and what he had to pay for my lawsuit, which I won, has been much more costly. Yes, we're talking about those kinds of amounts. And this is particularly bad for my father because part of his obsession with my grandfather's house wasn't about the memories. He wanted to make money from it. He planned to get it to sell it. I mean, my grandfather's body wasn't even cold yet, and he was already arguing about the inheritance because he needed the money. The reason for this is that the money he lent to my cousin, along with subsequent loans, left him in a delicate financial position. And the fight with me made it even worse, although he can't blame anyone but himself since he brought it on himself. He could have used the money he spent on lawyers to close the debt and still would have had some financial stability. My parents have had to sell their house. Part of the money was used to pay my lawsuit and the rest to cover other debts. They've really been heavily affected financially by that bad investment. They still have my father's business, which as far as I know is profitable. However, he's been looking to sell a part of it to alleviate some debts. Someone in the family suggested I buy it so the business stays in the family. But having my father as a partner isn't one of the most tempting ideas right now. Besides, it's not an industry I like or one where I can contribute anything with my knowledge. At least I know my father won't have the money to keep filing complaints over whatever comes to his mind. Edit. My father sold part of his company to a family member. I thought it might interest some people who asked about it.